President-elect Trump's push to raise NATO defense spending to 5% of GDP has divided European allies. While some near Russia support the plan, others cite budget constraints, highlighting tensions over U.S. calls for greater defense contributions as NATO nears a decision on a new target.
All right, so today we're going to dive into NATO defense spending.
Okay.
We've got a whole bunch of articles here.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of revolving around this proposal from former President Trump.
Okay.
Where he's basically saying NATO countries should be spending a lot more. Way more than they are now on defense.
It's interesting, isn't it? It
Yeah.
really puts a spotlight, I think, on that whole kind of delicate balance within NATO, you know, all those alliances and the financial realities for each country.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the big question of global security.
Yeah, so to put it simply, he wants NATO countries to commit 5% of their GDP to defense.
Okay.
Which is more than double the current target of 2%.
Right.
And here's the thing.
Yeah.
No NATO country, not even the U.S.,
Right.
currently spends that much.
Yeah. That raises a lot of questions.
It does.
I mean, is that even feasible? Like,
Yeah.
can these countries actually make that kind of increase?
Yeah.
Or is it, you know, is it more about sending a strong message?
Well, let's look at some of the reactions from European leaders.
Yeah.
Because it's pretty mixed.
Oh, really?
You've got some who are totally on board,
Okay.
like the Estonian prime minister.
Okay.
They seem to be all for it.
Interesting.
They see it as a way to really stand up to Russia.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense given Estonia's location, right?
Oh, totally.
They share a border with Russia.
Yeah.
So their perspective on defense is going to be shaped by that proximity.
For sure.
Yeah.
But then you've got leaders like the German chancellor.
Okay.
Who are a bit more hesitant.
I see.
I mean, they're facing their own economic challenges.
Right.
They haven't even hit that 2% target yet.
Yeah.
And some officials in Germany are even calling Trump's idea complete madness.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine the discussions
Oh my God.
happening behind closed doors
Yeah.
at these international summits?
I can only imagine. It's got to be intense. It really highlights, I think, the challenges of reaching a consensus
Oh, for sure.
in a democratic system.
Right.
When you're dealing with, you know, these big, complex, global issues, you've got national interests to consider, different economic situations, and you have to keep public opinion in mind, too.
It's like trying to solve a giant puzzle.
It is.
All the pieces keep shifting around.
Absolutely.
And speaking of adding to the complexity,
Oh, yeah.
we can't ignore the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine.
Right.
I mean, all this talk about increased defense spending, it's happening against this backdrop of Russia's aggression, which has definitely made a lot of countries nervous.
It's been a real wake-up call, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, the situation in Ukraine has really underlined the potential threats that NATO countries are facing.
Yeah.
And countries like Poland and the Baltic states, being right next to Russia, they are particularly focused on strengthening their defenses.
Well, Poland's already surpassing that 2% target.
Wow.
They're putting a lot of resources into defense.
Okay.
But then you have countries like Germany,
Right.
a major European power, lagging behind.
Yeah, I can see how that would cause some friction within the alliance.
Big time.
Yeah, you know, creates a sense of uneven burden sharing,
Right.
which can definitely lead to tension.
Yeah.
And then you add another layer of complexity
Oh, yeah.
with Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO,
Right.
which Russia sees as a direct threat.
Of course.
It's clear that, you know, this isn't just about numbers.
Right.
It's about power dynamics and strategic positioning
For sure.
on a global scale.
So it's really about a lot more than just money.
It is.
It's about all these other factors
Absolutely.
that are kind of coming into play.
Yeah.
And with all this focus on Trump's 5% proposal,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, even before he brought it up, wasn't there already a growing sense that the 2% target needed a rethink?
Yeah.
Like it just wasn't enough.
There was definitely a growing sentiment, I think, that 2% target, which,
Okay.
you know, was set quite a while ago, was becoming outdated and not really keeping pace with the change in landscape of global security.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're seeing a shift in how nations are thinking about defense, their priorities, their concerns, and how they need to allocate resources.
So it sounds like Trump's proposal, whether it's realistic or not, has really just kind of kicked off this much bigger conversation about the future of NATO and how it needs to adapt.
Absolutely. And this upcoming NATO summit is going to be very interesting to watch.
Okay.
They're expected to update their spending targets.
Right.
And the new Secretary General has been talking about a wartime mindset.
A wartime mindset?
Yeah, when it comes to planning. So this could be a real turning point for the alliance with significant changes in how they operate and how they allocate their resources.
So a lot to unpack here.
A lot to unpack.
What really stands out to you in all of this?
Well, I think what's fascinating is how this debate really exposes the tensions and complexities of international alliances.
Right.
You have all these different countries with different priorities and different levels of risk tolerance, all trying to work together under this shared umbrella of security.
Yeah, and it's not just about the countries themselves, is it?
Right.
We also have to consider the impact on everyday citizens.
Exactly.
I mean, this isn't just some abstract discussion happening in boardrooms.
Yeah.
These decisions about defense spending have real-world consequences for people's lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the big picture, the geopolitical maneuvering, the military strategies, but ultimately this is about people.
Right. It all comes back down to people and how it affects their lives.
Exactly.
So if countries start pouring significantly more money into defense, it's going to have ripple effects across society.
For sure.
It's not just going to be contained to the military.
Exactly. I mean, imagine a country like Germany, which is struggling to meet the current 2% target.
Right.
If they were suddenly forced to hike their spending up to 5%,
well,
where's that money going to come from?
Right. Something's got to give.
Something's got to give.
So we could be talking about cuts in other areas.
Potentially.
Like education,
right,
healthcare, social programs.
Absolutely.
Which would directly impact the quality of life for people in those countries.
Yeah. And I mean, the economic implications can go even further. It's not just about what happens within a country's borders. Increased defense spending in one place can have an impact on global markets.
Wow.
Trade relationships. Yeah. Even currency values.
Oh, yeah.
It's all connected.
It's like that saying, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil.
Yeah. You know the rest.
It's true.
We're talking about a complex system here.
Right.
And it's hard to predict exactly how these changes would play out.
So many variables.
And that brings us back to you, the listener.
Yeah.
This isn't just some theoretical discussion about numbers and percentages.
Right.
These decisions about defense spending, they affect everyone.
It's real world stuff.
Yeah.
It can influence your country's economy.
Exactly.
Your own sense of security.
Yeah.
And even the broader global landscape.
Absolutely. It really underlines the importance of staying informed and engaged in these discussions.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that affects all of us.
Defense spending isn't just about dollars and cents.
No, it's not.
It's about shaping the kind of world we want to live in.
Right.
It's about figuring out the best way to achieve peace and stability in a complex and ever-changing world.
I'm glad you brought up the idea of peace.
Yeah.
Because that kind of leads me to something that's been on my mind throughout this whole conversation.
Yeah.
What if we kind of took a step back and looked beyond this traditional idea of defense?
Yeah.
Which is so focused on military might.
Right, right.
Could there be other, perhaps more effective paths to achieving a lasting peace?
That's a really important question to ask.
Yeah.
Is simply pouring more and more money into tanks and missiles really the best way to achieve security in the long run?
Yeah.
Or could we achieve greater stability by focusing on things like diplomacy, international cooperation, maybe even addressing the root causes of conflict?
I mean, wouldn't it make sense to invest in things like conflict resolution programs, economic development in struggling regions, initiatives that promote understanding between different cultures?
Those are all valuable ideas.
Yeah.
And they point to a broader question about how we define security in the 21st century.
Right.
It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking the security is purely about military strength.
Right.
But perhaps we need a more holistic approach.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the big picture, the potential consequences, the need for a broader perspective.
Right.
But let's circle back to some of the specifics from the articles we've been looking at.
Yeah.
One of them mentioned that Trump's proposal for a 5% defense spending target was met with quite a bit of skepticism from analysts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some even called it a performative stunt.
Wow.
Suggesting it was more about optics than a realistic goal.
Interesting.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's certainly true that reaching a 5% target
Yeah.
would require a massive shift in spending for most NATO countries. It's hard to imagine them making that kind of adjustment without facing some serious economic challenges.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And it raises the question of whether such a drastic increase is really necessary.
Right.
Or if it's more about sending a message of strength, as you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And it's worth remembering that even achieving the current 2% target has been a struggle for some countries.
Right.
We talked about Germany earlier.
Yeah.
They've consistently fallen short of that goal.
Yeah.
Despite facing pressure from the U.S. and other allies.
Right. And I imagine that lagging behind on defense spending creates its own set of problems within the alliance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can lead to resentment.
Right.
A sense that some countries are shirking their responsibilities. Leading to tension and distrust within the alliance.
Yeah.
And it can also fuel arguments
Yeah.
that the burden of defense is falling disproportionately on certain members,
Right.
particularly the U.S., which contributes the most overall to NATO's budget,
Yeah.
even if it doesn't spend the highest percentage of its GDP.
So it seems like this focus on percentage targets, well, it might seem like a straightforward way to measure commitment.
Yeah.
Might actually be oversimplifying a very complex issue.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about hitting arbitrary numbers. It's about ensuring that resources are being used effectively.
Yeah.
And that NATO as an organization has the capabilities it needs to address the specific security challenges it faces.
Okay, so it's about more than just the money.
It is.
It's about making sure that money is being used strategically and effectively.
Right.
So while those percentage targets can be a useful starting point, they don't tell the whole story.
Exactly. We need to look at things like military readiness, technological advancements, and the evolving nature of the threats that NATO is facing.
It's a constantly changing landscape.
It is.
Simply throwing more money at the problem without a clear strategic vision isn't going to make anyone safer.
And that brings us back to the idea of a wartime mindset, which the new Secretary General has been talking about.
Right.
What exactly does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, what does that actually look like?
Well, it suggests a shift away from complacency and towards a more proactive approach to defense planning. It means recognizing that the world is becoming increasingly unpredictable.
Right.
And that NATO needs to be prepared for a wider range of potential scenarios, including high-intensity conflicts.
So it's about anticipating potential threats and being ready to respond quickly and decisively if necessary.
Precisely. And it also implies a greater focus on things like intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and developing the ability to move forces quickly and efficiently.
I can see how that kind of thinking would influence the discussions about defense spending.
Absolutely. If NATO is going to adopt a more proactive wartime approach, it's going to need the resources to back that up.
It's got to put its money where its mouth is.
And that's going to put pressure on member countries to increase their contributions.
So it sounds like we're entering a new chapter for NATO.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
The alliance is facing a convergence of factors. The changing global landscape, increasing threats, internal tensions, and now this push for a more proactive approach to defense, all of which are going to shape its future direction.
Yeah, it really does feel like we're at a crossroads.
It does.
And it makes you wonder about the human cost of all this.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond just the economic implications.
Right.
What about the social and political impact of increased military presence?
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
You know, we can't just look at this in terms of budgets and troop numbers.
Right.
There's a human dimension to consider as well.
For sure.
When countries increase their military presence, it affects the lives of everyday people, especially in those communities that host military bases.
I imagine there are both benefits and drawbacks to having a large military presence.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There can be economic benefits. Certainly, military bases create jobs, often stimulate local economies. But there can also be concerns about the environmental impact, potential cultural clashes, and even anxieties about becoming a target.
Oh, yeah.
In the event of a conflict.
So it's not a simple equation.
No, it's not.
It's not just about abstract military strategy.
Right.
It's about real people living their lives with this added presence of military forces in their midst.
And that brings us to a really crucial question.
Okay.
And I'd love to get your perspective on this as well, listener.
All right, lay it on us.
What if we reimagined the entire conversation about defense?
Okay.
Instead of automatically defaulting to military spending as the primary solution to every threat?
Yeah.
Could we explore other, perhaps more sustainable ways to create a safer world?
That's a thought-provoking question.
It is.
It really challenges us to think outside the box of that traditional idea of security and defense.
Exactly. What if instead of investing primarily in military hardware, we directed more resources towards diplomacy, conflict resolution, and addressing the underlying causes of conflict?
Okay, like what?
Such as poverty, inequality, and even climate change.
It seems like a more proactive approach.
It is. Yeah. It really is.
Rather than just reacting to the symptoms.
Exactly. And it requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing security primarily through a military lens, we could start thinking about it in a broader sense, encompassing things like economic well-being, social justice, and environmental sustainability.
So true security isn't just about military strength.
Right.
It's about creating a world where people feel safe and secure in all aspects of their lives.
It's about building a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Yeah.
And where conflicts are resolved peacefully and fairly.
That's a powerful vision.
It is.
And it makes you realize that this whole debate about NATO defense spending isn't just about numbers and percentages.
It's not.
It's about the kind of world we want to live in.
Absolutely.
And the legacy we want to leave for future generations.
That's precisely it.
Yeah.
It's about making choices that promote peace, stability, and well-being for all.
Well, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
From the specifics of Trump's proposal to these broader questions about the future of NATO and the very nature of security in the 21st century.
It's complex.
It is.
It is.
Hopefully you, the listener, have found it informative.
Yeah.
And maybe even a little bit challenging.
I hope so.
Keep thinking critically. Keep asking questions.
Absolutely.
And keep engaging in these crucial conversations that shape our world.
They're important.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Trump's proposal to raise NATO defense spending sparks crucial questions about alliance unity and balancing security with economic realities. What are your thoughts on this controversial plan? Share your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates and insights.